Hey there. Going to continue our look at people in power and see how some of the previously mentioned key figures, as well as some additional ones, are going to struggle for power, and what are going to be the long-term results of that out of the Middle Ages. Focusing on what would become Germany and that area's relationship with an entity known as the Holy Roman Empire, you're going to see a failure to build a unified Germany. Under Charlemagne, who will extend Frankish rule and actually unify this region through Christianity by the sword, is going to be named emperor by Pope Leo III in 800. Again, merging together Christian, Roman, and even Germanic cultures, which is going to be hugely influential on the rest of Europe as they move forward. His death, however, will bring about successors who are not nearly as capable, and this will be an opportunity lost. As we go 150 years or more later, Otto I will actually conquer and unify Germany and Italy, and in a move that gains favor with the Pope, will also be named emperor. This is another opportunity. However, conflicts internally are going to prevent this from being very lasting. The first leader to really call or use the regions and call the region the Holy Roman Empire will be Frederick I in 1152. The question has to remain, though, is this really an empire? I mean, was it holy? There was manipulation of religious favor. Was it Roman? Definitely not. And was it an empire? It wasn't quite unified enough, but the name seemed to stick. Instead, it was more of a patchwork of feudal territories, and people like Frederick would sometimes anger the religious leaders, like the Pope, and create problems on their own. So this division of territories would be long-standing, and we're going to see, even as we get into the Reformation, be a continued thorn in the side of the region. Moving on, let's look at the Crusades and see how those conflicts also were struggles for power. The causes of the Crusades, as the Seljuk Turks were threatening the Byzantine Empire in the 1000s, the emperor of the Byzantines would ask the Pope, Urban II, for help. Now this is interesting because less than 50 years earlier, the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church had parted their ways, with the Pope and the Patriarch excommunicating one another. However, Urban sees this as an opportunity to unify Europe and through Christianity, and understand also that everybody kind of had their motives, whether it was the Byzantines and their leadership or even the Muslims. Everybody entered into this battle or these campaigns with different intentions, perhaps. Short-term effects would start off as a promoted pilgrimage to provide safety for Christians, would turn in actually to raiding missions. It became less about religion and initially, and less about power and more about money and the power that could be held through wealth. The Seljuks, of course, had already been replaced in the region by the time the Christians got there, and though they won some battles, the European Christians had limited success in the region. Long-term effects is it definitely did have religious impact, because it created a good guy, bad guy image, depending on which side someone might be on, between those ethnicities, those religions, and even those cultures. Some of that can still be seen today. As religions and political leaders continue to see struggles in other areas, so let's look at the next bullet, the struggle by monarchs to exert royal authority over nobles and churchmen. A couple of great examples would be the lay investiture issue. It says in 1075, Henry IV and Pope Gregory VII get into a dispute over who can name church officials. The lay investiture was, of course, a lay person, such as a king, naming those officials of the church because they were part of the feudal system, and their feudal authority and loyalty were owed there. However, their spiritual authority, the Pope said, really should be in his hands. So this dispute came with its own set of ultimatums, threats of excommunication, and would not be resolved until the Concordat at Worms in 1122. So spelled Worms, and to my knowledge pronounced Worms, I guess depending on who you talk to. In the end, officials would be, of course, named by the church, There's their spiritual authority, but confirmed by and empowered by, for the feudal responsibilities, by the king. There was a conflict over taxes that would create an issue on the location of the Pope. Boniface III and Philip IV of France, Boniface, of course, was the Pope. They disputed over who should be able to tax, or if you could tax, the clergy. In 1305, Philip had cardinals pick a French Pope, and that Pope was then moved to Avignon, which is a city in France. This is definitely going to be have an impact on the downward trend of church power. The church became weaker. In 1378, the Italian cardinals would then choose an Italian pope, and now you have two popes. So which pope are you following? And this is going to create disputes within Europe. This is known as the Great Schism. At one time there was even 3 popes, which definitely was confusing. It would not be until 1414 that the Roman Catholic Church would return to 1 pope, and of course you could say the damage perhaps had already been done. Conflict with the church also led to changes in political design of nations. The power of kings, example number 1 over the lay investiture again. More power, more secular. Of course, the nations and those political leaders became more powerful. The second one would be, let's go back to Frederick I and his, as the Holy Roman Empire attacking kingdoms in Italy, it's going to anger the Pope. This is going to undermine the authority of the emperor, and Germany, again, as we said earlier, is going to fail to unite. So what role was religion used to unify then and centrally govern expanding territories with diverse populations? It was still important. Example 1, let's go back to Philip IV, France creating what is known as the Estates General, trying to empower the church, but through his own lenses, he creates this body that's similar to the Parliament to help solve problems that may be needing, I'm going to use the word okie dokie, from somebody other than the king. It's kind of a tip of the cap to, or a nod to the people, if you will, as an absolute monarch, which many of these guys were as monarchs in Europe. Maybe I can stay in power if I let some people feel like they have some authority in the decisions. Well, the Estates General was never really that, I'll say, important in France as their monarchs got more and more absolute. It would not be until the 1700s, and we'll study this later, that it becomes the site or the cradle for what would be the French Revolution. The second example would be the role of the church to unite the people of Europe through Christianity. This comes, of course, with a price. If you're going to unite people, then everybody's got to have the same view and outlook. If you are different, then you have to be persecuted, the church would say, and the creation of the Inquisition would make this a very dangerous habit or a very dangerous prospect to have disagreeing thoughts of doctrine. Being declared a heretic means that you are a believer, however, your beliefs are maybe a little bit different than what the official word of the church is. This is probably going to mean you're going to be tortured until you confess and then face a quick death, or just tortured until you die in long and agonizing death. I don't think either one is a good option. Not a whole lot of freedom there, is it? Moving on, it says struggles for limiting power then of kings would lead to political changes such as the Magna Carta. Kings, of course, were recognized as being too powerful. Absolute monarchs were dominating Europe by this time. Remember, they had learned this through the Greco-Roman culture, or the Alexander the Great model that was repeated through the Romans there. When rulers are bad, this is bad because there's really no bureaucracy and then the system becomes ineffective. The struggle for nobles and landowners were questing power, and they many times were supported by the church. Here's the church trying to jump on the right train, follow the right horse. Who's going to give them more say-so, more authority, the king or the nobles? So knocking down the kings a notch, the church would oftentimes throw their support, and of course, in that case, with their influence, the support of the people to the nobles. So in 1215, the Magna Carta was created and signed in England. King John, who was not a very effective king, was forced to sign this document, and it was initially created an environment where nobles were protected from things like bad wars, to high taxes, and even protected their legal rights. Later versions would even extend this to business practices. The impacts would open the door for limited government. Power of the church and the nobles were prompting the king to consult with them. This is the first moves towards what would become a parliament or a legislative body. These were stepping stones to democracy, and it becomes part of the British story for becoming a democracy. The rise of nation states, as England and France were on their way, and nations like Germany and Italy were having a hard time getting unified. Know that a nation state is a group of people with common identities, set geographic boundaries, and controlling governments. Why would you create such a thing? Well, with challenges to the church for political power becomes a move to separate. Kings want to elevate themselves beyond the church, and nationalism that surrounds events like the 100 Years' War are going to be very telling in that development. Once again, even though the routes are different, the English and the French are going to be able to create these through the Middle Ages, whereas Germany and Italy are going to have to wait until all the way into the 19th century for that to occur. All right, thanks a lot.